American bases are under fire. Iranian missiles are rewriting the rules of engagement. And behind the scenes, a web of alliances involving Russia, China, and North Korea is quietly reshaping the entire global order. Today, we are cutting through the noise and telling you exactly what is happening, who is winning, and what comes next. To understand this crisis, you need to forget almost everything mainstream media has told you about the Middle East. The story is not simply about terrorism, religion, or oil. It is about power. Who has it, who is losing it, and who is quietly positioning themselves to seize it. What I'm going to lay out for you today is built on deep military analysis, geopolitical intelligence, and years of watching these conflicts unfold from the inside. Some of what you're about to hear will be uncomfortable. Some of it contradicts what you've been told by your government, and all of it is backed by the facts on the ground. Let's start at the center of it all, Iran. By almost every conventional measure, Iran should be losing. It faces crippling economic sanctions. Its refineries have been forced to halt operations. Its political and military leaders have been assassinated, some under circumstances that remain deeply suspicious. And it is surrounded by American military assets on multiple sides. And yet, Iran is strategically winning. How is that possible? The answer comes down to three things: alliances, geography, and the one factor Western analysts consistently underestimate: the human will to resist. On alliances, Iran does not stand alone. Russia, China, and North Korea form a strategic shield around the country. This is not direct military intervention. These powers are not sending troops. Instead, they provide something potentially more valuable: scientific cooperation, military technology transfers, and logistical support that quietly sustains Iran's war capacity. The three-way cooperation between Russia, Iran, and North Korea in particular has enabled the movement of weapons technology at a pace that has genuinely surprised Western intelligence agencies. Weapons, components, knowledge flowing through back channels that sanctions were never designed to fully close. On geography, Iran enjoys one of the most powerful defensive advantages in modern warfare. It is defending its own territory. History is brutal on this point. From Vietnam to Afghanistan to Iraq, invading and occupying a determined, populous nation on its own soil is extraordinarily costly. Iran's mountainous terrain, dispersed population centers, and hardened military infrastructure make any ground campaign a nightmare. And then there is the human factor. The deaths of Iranian civilians, including children, have not broken Iranian society. They have hardened it. The targeted assassinations of political and spiritual leaders, the documented killing of non-combatants, these acts have produced a unity of purpose inside Iran that no amount of sanctions can easily destroy. This is a society that has already lived through decades of economic pressure and emerged intact. It is not a population that will fold under the weight of a prolonged siege. Iran is not just surviving, it is waiting, and it is patient. Now let's turn to the American side, and here the picture is far less flattering for Washington. The financial cost of sustaining military operations near Iran is staggering. We are talking about over $3 trillion committed to Middle Eastern engagements, and that number keeps climbing with every deployment, every base reinforcement, every missile defense system repositioned away from Asia to cover the Gulf. That last point deserves a moment. The redeployment of American missile defense systems from South Korea to the Middle East is not just a logistics decision. It is a signal to America's allies in the Indo-Pacific that Washington's attention is divided. Japan, South Korea, partners that depend on American deterrence against North Korea and China, are watching this with real unease. But the deeper crisis is political. There is a fundamental constitutional tension in Washington over who actually has the authority to take the country to war. Military operations have been launched and expanded without formal congressional approval, and this is not merely a legal technicality. It is a crack in the legitimacy of American military action that adversaries have learned to exploit on the world stage. Despite repeated promises from American leaders to end foreign wars and stop regime change operations, the United States remains deeply embedded in this conflict.
American soldiers continue to take casualties. American taxpayers continue to fund operations that the majority of the public has never voted for. And then there is the damage to American credibility itself. The assassination of Iranian political and military leaders has destroyed whatever remained of diplomatic trust. These are not acts that go unremembered. They become rallying points, grievances that outlast any individual administration and poison any future negotiation. Add the documented civilian casualties, the children killed in strikes, the attacks on civilian infrastructure, and you understand why American moral authority in the region has collapsed so dramatically. The rest of the world is watching, and increasingly, the rest of the world is choosing sides, and it is not choosing Washington. Now we arrive at the most politically sensitive question in this entire analysis. What exactly is the relationship between the United States and Israel, and is it actually serving American interests? The honest answer, the one that almost no one in Washington will say out loud, is no, it is not. American foreign policy in the region has become completely subordinated to Israeli strategic priorities. Despite campaign promises to disengage from foreign conflicts, the United States has been pulled deeper and deeper into the region. American soldiers continue to die, American money continues to flow, and the American public continues to be told this is all in their national interest. It is not. The Abraham Accords, celebrated as a historic peace achievement, deserve a much harder look. Rather than empowering Arab nations and building genuine regional stability, these agreements have functioned as a mechanism for locking Gulf Arab states into a strategic framework that serves Israeli expansion at the expense of Arab sovereignty. The Gulf monarchies find themselves in an impossible position. They are exposed to Iranian missile attacks, they are inadequately defended by the Americans they have relied on for decades, and they are politically compromised, associated with Israeli policies that are despised by their own populations. Look at Bahrain, a Shiite majority population governed by a Sunni monarchy, held in place by foreign security arrangements. The restlessness among ordinary people is real and growing. Iran understands this dynamic very well and plays it with patience. Meanwhile, the broader question of accountability refuses to disappear. Legal proceedings against Israeli leadership are underway. The principle established at Nuremberg still stands, that following orders does not absolve governments or individuals from responsibility for civilian deaths. The question of whether Israel's military conduct constitutes war crimes is no longer being asked only by critics on the fringe. It is being asked in international courts. It is being asked by governments that were once reliable allies, and it is a question that will not go away no matter how much political pressure is applied to silence it. Roughly 20% of the world's oil passes through a narrow strip of water between Iran and Oman, the Strait of Hormuz. It is, without exaggeration, one of the most strategically vital geographic points on the entire planet, and Iran sits directly alongside it. This is not a new reality, but its implications are becoming more urgent by the month. China depends heavily on Iranian oil exports for its energy security. A sustained blockade of the strait would be catastrophic for the Chinese economy. This creates a powerful and permanent incentive for Beijing to keep Iran functional and protected, not out of ideological solidarity, but out of cold, hard economic self-interest. Control, or even just the credible threat of control over the strait, transforms Iran from a regional power into a global veto player on energy markets. At any moment of its choosing, Iran can threaten to send oil prices into a spiral that would damage every major economy on Earth. The United States understands this. Protecting freedom of navigation in the Gulf has been a cornerstone of American naval strategy for decades, but doing so against Iranian drone swarms, anti-ship missiles, and a hostile coastline stretching hundreds of kilometers is a fundamentally different challenge today than it was 30 years ago. What we are watching unfold is not a sudden war. It is a prolonged, grinding economic and military confrontation, a slow war of attrition, not unlike what we have seen in Ukraine, but now mirrored across the Middle East. A conflict designed not to achieve a single decisive victory, but to exhaust the opponent, to drain their treasury, to erode their alliances, to break their political will. And on that front, the side doing the exhausting appears to be winning. Western media consistently frames Iran as an isolated rogue state, alone against the international community. That framing is not misleading. It is deliberately designed to obscure what is actually happening. Russia and Iran have deepened their military technical partnership substantially. Drone technology, missile components, intelligence sharing. These exchanges have benefited both sides in their respective conflicts and have been far more extensive than Western governments publicly acknowledge. Weapons, components, knowledge flowing through back channels that sanctions were never designed to fully close. And then there is China. China's position is carefully calibrated. China does not want a direct confrontation with the United States, not yet, but it cannot afford to allow Iran to be destroyed. The energy dependency is one reason, but the deeper logic is this: a world where the United States can unilaterally dismember any government it chooses is a world that is fundamentally dangerous for China's long-term survival.
Calm, neutral. So China supports, Russia supplies, North Korea provides, and Iran endures. This is not a coalition in the traditional sense. There are no formal treaties, no joint command structures, no shared ideology, but it functions as one, and it is durable in a way that Washington has consistently failed to appreciate. The conflict in the Middle East cannot be understood in isolation. It is one theater in a much larger transformation of global power, one in which the post-Cold War era of American dominance is coming to an end. The question is not whether this transition happens, it is how violent the process will be. Every serious conversation about this conflict eventually arrives at the same question: could this go nuclear? The honest answer is probably not, but the conditions that make nuclear escalation unthinkable are eroding faster than most people realize. Iran has not publicly declared possession of nuclear weapons, but the technical knowledge and enriched materials to develop them exist within Iran's program. This strategic ambiguity appears to be deliberate, a deterrent without the political cost of a formal declaration. On the American side, the use of nuclear weapons against Iran would require congressional authorization, a threshold so politically high as to be practically unreachable in any scenario short of a direct attack on American territory. What serious analysts worry about is not a deliberate nuclear strike, it is miscalculation, an escalatory spiral that neither side fully intends, but neither side can stop once it begins. The assassinations of Iranian leaders, the Iranian strikes on American bases, the Hezbollah attacks exposing gaps in Israeli missile defense systems. Each escalation narrows the space available for de-escalation. And when you factor in the suspicious deaths of Iranian aviation officials, when trust between the major players has essentially collapsed completely, the margin for error becomes terrifyingly thin. The consensus among serious analysts is clear: full nuclear exchange remains highly improbable, but improbable is not impossible, and in a conflict this volatile, improbable events have a way of occurring. So where does this all lead? The most realistic scenario is not a sudden apocalyptic war. It is a prolonged erosion, a slow and painful unraveling. For the United States, continued financial hemorrhage, deepening political division at home, and a gradual but irreversible loss of influence in a region it has poured trillions of dollars into for decades. For Israel, growing international isolation, internal political crisis, and a security environment that military superiority alone cannot stabilize. Bombs can destroy infrastructure, but they cannot manufacture legitimacy. For Iran, hardship, yes, real hardship, but also the quiet consolidation of a strategic position that would have seemed completely unthinkable 20 years ago. For Russia and China, the strategic patience to watch a rival overextend itself while quietly building the architecture of a new world order that does not require American approval. The populations of the world are exhausted by the lies, by the gap between what their governments tell them and what they can see with their own eyes, by the civilians killed and then explained away,
by the trillions spent while hospitals close and schools decay at home. That exhaustion is real, it is global, and it is reaching a breaking point. The old rules no longer apply. The old alliances are fracturing. The old certainties are gone. What replaces them, and whether that replacement comes through diplomacy or through catastrophe, is the defining question of our time. The Middle East has always been where empires test their limits. Rome, the Ottomans, the British, the Americans. History does not repeat itself, but it rhymes with a precision that should alarm us all. The question for our generation is not whether this conflict reshapes the world, it is whether we understand what is happening clearly enough to survive what comes next. We will keep bringing you the analysis that mainstream media will not touch. If this breakdown gave you something to think about, share it. The people who most need to see this analysis are the ones least likely to find it on their own. Subscribe, stay informed, and leave your questions in the comments. Every single one gets read.